So, welcome to Elected. This is a very special podcast because I'm sitting down today with Rachel Notley, who is a month-ish away from.
I think we are. What are we today? We are the 17th. So
a month and 5
month
days.
and 4 days. Not that I'm counting.
Yeah, exactly. Away from stepping down as the leader of Alberta's NDP. You're a former premier, current leader of the official opposition, an MLA. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to sit down with you. And as you were coming in before we started recording, you were here almost maybe a year ago.
Yeah, very close to a year ago in the middle of the campaign.
Yeah.
I don't remember what we announced now. I think
Small
it was
business.
Small business. Right? Yeah. So I know it was fun, and it was a great setting as well for the campaign because it's such a great store with so many neat products, and so a nice opportunity to kind of feature that a little bit too. So good.
And less controversial today.
Yes, a little bit less hostility.
Yes, for both of us.
Yeah, but really nowhere near this.
No, exactly.
Actually, it is fun.
Right?
It's still fun.
It's still fun, but different.
Yeah.
So I put a call out on social media to ask for questions on top of the ones I shared with your staff.
Oh yeah.
So the questions these are from, I have all of their names, and so I'm going to share their first name as well. And people were really thoughtful and have a lot of care for you as a person. So
very lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if I should start with my husband's question first or last.
Well, I know that's your call. You're going home. You're dealing with that.
Exactly. So maybe I'll start off. That's maybe a way to ease into the conversation. So my husband, Ali, wanted me to ask you, what advice do you have on your way out, but for young women who want to get into politics?
I think that I would tell them to be very much focused on their convictions and to have the courage of their convictions to go into it on the basis of what they believe in and on the basis of how much that matters to them. In today's world, I would say, look a little bit less at the number of likes and the number of retweets and all that kind of stuff, and focus a little bit more on what is it that you're in it for and what it is you want to achieve. And then, of course, always know that, a woman is at least as good as a man when it comes to being in politics, and do it the way that you feel comfortable.
Yeah. Do you think it's harder now for women in 2024 than it was when you first started? Or is it just different?
I think it's different. I think it is very different. I mean, in some ways it is harder. I honestly feel in some ways that the rights of women have backslid a little bit in the last decade.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, it's a bit harder. I think that as the economy is, for instance, in Alberta, we know that the economy is not serving the majority of people right now. People are falling farther and farther behind. And so that means that trend disproportionately impacts women. So that means that women who are wanting to find the time and the effort and the resources to get into politics are having to work a little bit harder, just as they are having to work a little bit harder for everything. So that part has changed. I think that people are more attuned to the idea of having different faces and different voices in leadership roles, though. So I think that part is less of a problem. But just some of the real basic fundamentals are a bit of a challenge, as they are for anybody that doesn't come to the table with a whole bunch of pre-existing wealth.
Yeah, it is really hard, and it is so much centered around having money. You need, it's the chances of being successful on a small budget are.
And of course, small. Now we've got the UCP is doing everything they can to bring big money back into politics.
Yeah,
and so that's a really horrible trend. And I know that's not what this was asking.
No,
but I do need to jump into this because it just
as political as you want.
Yeah, no. So you'll hear Smith and McIver make these outrageous claims that somehow our laws encouraged more big money. And let me just set the record straight. Our Bill 1 banned union and corporate donations. We limited third-party donations as much as we possibly could under the charter. The UCP came in and took some loopholes and stretched them as wide as they possibly could. And then for corporations to engage in political activism, and then eliminated them completely for unions. So they took a very unbalanced approach to third-party donations, invited corporate money back in, and then, of course, reached into the elections, the chief electoral office, and both fired the commissioner and shrunk their budget so that when people do make claims that stuff is happening illegally, they get around to determining the outcome of that about 4 or 5 years after the complaint is made and the election is over. So all in all, they've done everything they can to bring big money back in and to reduce oversight. And I would go in front of the Supreme Court of Canada and make that argument with great confidence. And when Smith and McIver suggest otherwise, they are simply lying.
Well, and doesn't McIver seem very reluctant on this front?
You can't really tell. Certainly that's the rumor that he's succeeded in getting out there, that he's doing all this reluctantly at the
direction of
the premier. Yeah. And, whether that's true or not, if I were the premier, I'd be irritated at a minister running out there trying to save his butt that way. But whether that is true or whether that's just some little game they're playing. The bottom line is they're making a lot of changes that are going against what many folks in those sectors, particularly municipal leaders, want. And it's certainly nothing that they ever ran on.
Yeah. Well, isn't it funny how you, I believe, were accused of doing things that you didn't run on, and that caused quite a that was the only thing for them to do it. People are much more willing to be like, oh yeah, I don't like what's the big deal?
I know.
Does that drive you crazy?
It does a little bit. I mean, their argument is that we didn't run on the carbon tax.
Yeah.
I will say that we did run on the idea of doing something very big, ambitious, and bold on climate change. And we made it clear that we were going to look at the whole range of options in terms of to address it. So we never said, oh, we will never do the carbon tax. We said, we're going to address climate change. We're going to have to do it really ambitiously.
Yeah.
We're going to get the best advice before we do it. So that's what we did. So that's a little bit different than saying, I'm going to give everybody a tax cut. Oh, I'm not.
Yeah.
But
until right before the next election.
Right. But that's not because they actually released a costed platform that suggested that tax cut would come into effect. It didn't suggest, it promised 5 months ago. Yeah. So, and then of course, all this stuff. I mean, she said, I respect local democracy, except that I don't. And now here's 3 bills to tell everyone how I don't. And then the CPP, refusing to talk about CPP, and then immediately embarking on a campaign to do something that the majority of Albertans don't want.
There are a lot of things that Albertans, I don't think, want, right? We don't want Bill 18. Right. We don't want Bill 20. Yep. So, directing how federal money can be spent at universities. That's 18. 20 is all of the changes to municipal government, but also a provincial police force. Yeah, right? The CPP. Like there's a long list that I have in my mind of things that I actually don't, that they didn't run on.
They didn't run on and refused to talk about. Right. And Albertans have
the tax cut.
Yeah. Have made it very clear that they don't want it. They're just carrying on.
But they don't care.
No.
Right. They also didn't run on the proposed changes that they've made for trans kids.
Oh, you're darn right.
Right.
They didn't.
They also add that to the list.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's should be like an NDP website. Yeah. Like
things we never asked for, things they never promised. Yeah.
Things that the UCP are doing that, surprise. Surprise list. Yeah. They're definitely giving you lots of ammunition going into the next election, but you're not going to be here.
No. No.
You're going to be relaxing somewhere on a deck, hopefully with a drink in your hand.
Hopes. Yeah. We did just get our deck redone.
Well, so there you go.
Completely ready now for me to, eat the popcorn. And
there you go. Yeah. Exactly. So Kim wanted me to ask you, do you have any regrets about entering politics? And if so, what are they?
I will say periodically when I look at colleagues of mine who I went to law school with, and then I look at our relative, financial stability, I think, choices, I don't know. But generally speaking, no. I mean, it's very meaningful work to be able to have the privilege to fight for the things that really matter to you. I may have said this to you before, but I've certainly said it in other settings that in the long history I have of doing candidate recruitment, which is something I started doing even before I was elected and did long before I was leader. One of the things I used to say to people is like, okay, well, if you get up and you're listening to the radio and you start yelling at the radio, this is a sign that you might actually be a very good candidate. This stuff really matters to you. And so the opportunity to go from that to having somebody actually listen to you when you're doing your yelling, to actually being in a position to change what we're yelling about, and in fact turn and do things that are really positive, that's a really unique privilege. And so I'm really glad that I was able to do that.
So if you're like me and you yell at the radio, that's a sign.
Yeah, that's It's definitely a sign. It's a sign that you are very
What when
animated.
When you do you listen to the radio?
I do.
What do you listen to?
Well, I mean, this will be a big trope that folks will be.
Let me guess. Well, CBC?
Yeah. Matt Galloway gives me all my news. Right?
Yeah, he's really good.
Yeah. Of course, I listen to, but I listen to CKUA as well. Okay. I do like local music.
Yeah.
So it'll depend, and then various and sundry podcasts, but it'll depend what it is, what kind of mood I'm in. Yeah. Whether I want to listen to some music.
Yeah.
Or whether I want to.
Do you want to relax or do you want to get angry?
Right. Yeah. Or sometimes it's just finding stuff that's interesting. But yeah, varies.
Okay. Which one should I go to next? Maybe tying into this, more on the retrospective side. Kristen wanted me to ask you, if you could change one thing that you did, what would it be and why?
I was thinking about that earlier, and I think one of the things we learned very quickly was how to, the politics around introducing a big change in policy or whatever. And so we learned it by getting it wrong the first time, right?
Yeah.
And so what we did wrong the first time was Bill 6. Now, I don't think the policy was wrong. To this day, I still think it's the right policy. I think it's outrageous that people get themselves angry over the prospect of giving some of the most vulnerable workers in our province the same rights that every other worker in the province and every other farm worker in the country enjoys. And the suggestion that they should not be entitled to the minimum wage, should not be kept safe at work, is ridiculous.
Yeah.
That being said, we introduced the concept and then delegated it to a public service who weren't as keen on the concept as us, and the consequences of the change and the nature and the scope of the change was communicated in a way that got people exceptionally upset, and for good reason, because the way it was communicated was quite unreasonable. That was not what we'd ever been planning to do. And so it taught us that we need to approach these things in a much more consultative, collaborative, open, transparent way. And so we did that on subsequent policy. But there's no question that we all look back now and go, oh, that was the end of the honeymoon right there. So it sure was. And
that happened pretty fast, didn't it?
It was December or November, December of 2015.
Yeah. I mean, lessons learned. It's always the hardest lessons that cause the most pain that you get the most out of, right?
Well, that's so true, right? You learn through failure.
Yes.
As they say, you don't, so failure is a sign of excellent learning.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It can really reframe things. What have you given any thought to what you're going to be doing next? Because one of the most common questions I got was, what are you going to be doing? But specifically, Anna asked me to ask you, Are you planning on running federally?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah. No, people do. Yeah. People ask me that quite frequently, and I say, "What have I ever done to you?" Like, I think I tried to be really nice to you. Why do you wish that on me? But no, politics is as I said before, it's a privilege and a incredible opportunity, but it does also, take its toll, and if I were still interested in that trade-off, then I'd be staying right here where my heart is in Alberta.
Why would you travel to Ottawa?
Trying to fix the state of things right now. But I think it's time for someone else to come in and do that. And also I kind of want to get a little bit of a life back.
Of course.
Yeah.
Tying into that, there's so much going on. And I think, we've only met a few times, but you don't strike me as someone who's going to stop paying attention.
No,
just because, you're not in the arena anymore. What do you, and I'm sure, I would imagine you're watching the leadership debates, to some degree, maybe.
Yep.
You've met everyone who's in the running. What are you thinking in terms of, for the person who takes on your job next? Do you have any thoughts on what they need to do, or any, what are you going to pass on to them when they fill your shoes?
Well, it would depend to a certain degree on who wins. Each person who wins brings a certain knowledge set and a certain set of skills and a certain set of priorities. And so in my view, it would, my advice to them would depend on the things that I think maybe they need to also pay attention to. And so that would change depending on who it is. But, no matter who it is, my role as the outgoing leader is to be supportive of the new leader, to give advice where asked, and to do that just with the leader, and to do everything we can and I can to help them going forward. So, you won't see me, doing little pot shots from the corner.
You're not going to be on X being like,
no. I don't think that's
no, that's not productive.
I don't think it's productive.
No. Yeah. Do you think, it's been interesting to see kind of Jason Kenney rehabilitate himself in his post-political life. Do you think that there's do you look at other politicians who've stepped away and think oh yeah, that's maybe a path for me? Or do you want to just do your own thing?
Well, I'm just trying to think about it offhand right now. I haven't really thought to model my next few
the rest
years
of years.
Off of someone else's path. I think it's something where I will figure it out. But what I know is true is that I will continue to care very much about the future of the party, and I'm going to do what I can to help it have its most successful.
Maria wanted me to ask you what you think it'll take for the NDP to beat the UCP in the next election.
Well, I think that we came awfully close last time, and much closer than people realize. And I think that to a certain degree, we need to sort of let Danielle Smith be Danielle Smith, because she is a excellent communicator, and that's a nice way of saying that she's very good at misleading people and creating a false impression. But folks are going to live the real life consequences of her choices, and so I think that those are going to be the matters that are in front of voters in the next election. That being said, I do think as well that we have to do a good job of offering people a sense of what they would get with a different government. So we need to both hold the UCP to account for the way in which their bad choices have made life harder for Albertans.
Yeah, they're not doing anything on affordability.
Oh, they're not doing anything on affordability at all. They're
making life more unaffordable.
I was going to say they are doing things on affordability.
They are making it worse. Unaffordable.
Yeah, they're making things worse on multiple fronts. So, so we need to make sure that folks connect the dots on that. But at the same time, we need to be really practical about what we're going to do to make things different for folks, and we need to provide an inspiring alternative to people. And so I think that's well within the wheelhouse of any of the people that are running for leadership right now. I often say, people will say, "Oh, well, nobody. You have to have somebody that everybody, across the province knows, or whatever."
Right.
I remind people that about 2 weeks before I was elected leader of Alberta's NDP in the fall of 2014, I called up Joe Ceci to ask him to validate a policy proposal that I had, which was minimum wage. He wasn't 100% sure who I was.
Really?
Yeah. And
no,
seriously. And the fact of the matter is almost nobody in Calgary knew who I was in the fall of 2014. Even after I became the leader, nobody in Calgary knew who I was in the fall of 2014. Now obviously I then reached out and badgered him, and a couple months later he announced he would run.
You run together, don't you?
We do,
not like just elections, but running.
Oh yeah. We run all the time together. We're great friends. Yeah. But the point is he really, neither he nor many other people in Calgary, like 95% of them, knew who I was 6 months before the election in May of 2015.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that there's a lot of different paths to getting people to cast their ballot.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, and I had the honor, I sat down with all of the candidates running, Raki, Anchi, Gil McGowan. I loved all of them in different ways because they were all so unique and they all had like different qualities. And I agree. I don't think that, especially because of the amount of time that you're giving the next leader to really build that name recognition. If they come in with less, that, I would hope that they have a team around them, and
I think
they have the opportunity
wins,
to do that.
They will. I mean, we've got an incredible team in Alberta's NDP, and no matter who wins, they're going to have a great set of resources behind them to lift them up, as well as to support the rest of the caucus. So, I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, I do too. And I would also say, like people, when I was asking for questions to ask you today, and a lot of it, people were like, and I do have some that are more on the other side of things that are not like on the legacy piece. And I was like, it's what the leadership race has done for me personally is give me something to be positive about, which I feel it is nice because on the flip side, when you go outside of thinking about who might be the leader of the NDP, then you go back to the UCP and it's just an overwhelming sense of, wow, there's a lot, there's a lot going on and a lot. And I don't want this for the province. Right. And then I can go back to my happy place.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go to, Holly's question. I actually received a few questions on misinformation and disinformation. So Holly's curious to know what you think that government can do to tackle what she considers to be the greatest threat to our democracy, which is misinformation. She said government messaging can make a difference, but what else? Like, is this something you like?
This is a thing that makes me very concerned.
Yeah.
And so I tell the story and it sounds very wonky, but anyway, whatever else.
That's okay.
So that's what we knew. But back in, and there's been a profound change on this issue in the last 15, 16 years since I first got elected. So back in, I remember when I was a part of a caucus of two, and it was probably in around about 2010, we were having a lot of debates around healthcare. And the minister at the time told the legislature that they were not working on trying to privatize healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And then what ended up happening was there was a leak of some cabinet documents that suggested that, in fact, no, they were exactly talking about ways in which they might start privatizing pieces of healthcare. And so I was so appalled that this minister had stood up in the House and said this thing, and it wasn't true.
Mm-hmm.
I went off and I did what was, I think, probably the first time in Alberta's legislature, a 15, 20-page submission on how this amounted to a breach of privilege
Mm-hmm.
For all the members of the House, because, on one hand, we're not allowed to use the L word in the House, but on the other hand, the expectation is that people are going to tell the truth. So I did this long, endless breach of privilege submission. The speaker at the time, huge partisan, Ken Kowalski, actually took time away, said, okay, well, I'm going to not make a ruling right now, went off for quite some time, got his clerk to write a similarly long submission about, well, yes, it was this, but it did sound like this, but blah, blah, blah. And they basically sort of wrote the law and how it turns out like they were just misunderstood.
It's their interpretation.
Yeah. Or there can be two versions, two different
Right.
understandings of the same set of fact or whatever. But anyway, the point being is it was a big deal when someone was caught in a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of media around it, and it was a big deal. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that what the UCP ought to do is about once a month, when they do their media notices for an upcoming press conference, they should say, oh, and also today is our once monthly truth day. So you can count on us to not lie to you in this press conference. Because the amount that they lie is jaw-dropping. It's horrible. So, and they're not being held to account. So, what can government do? Well, what we need is
assuming that's a different government, right? Because
we
nothing's going to
need
change.
politicians on all sides,
right,
to recommit themselves to telling the truth.
Yeah.
There's a long, old-fashioned statement. You are entitled to your own opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. And that is something that is completely qualitatively different now than it was when I first got into politics. And I think part of it is a function of Trump. But also, I'll be quite frank, I think Danielle Smith's a bit of a sociopath, and she just doesn't acknowledge the constant contradictions between what she says here and what she says here. She just won't even acknowledge.
But people are also willing to let it pass, right? In the same way that I see with Trump, right?
That's the thing. And so it goes, so politicians have learned that they can get away with it.
Yeah.
And so, yes, they need to hold themselves to account to their own inner sense of integrity, but also voters need to hold them to account as well.
But the dilemma that I see is on the left or on any kind of more progressive political place, there is accountability, right?
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side of the political spectrum, there's less, it's like, oh, you did this. Okay, sure. Right. And so it's sometimes I feel like progressive people are playing, tried to make an analogy once. It's like, they're trying to play baseball, but they've taken away the ball and the bat in some ways. And then the UCP shows up on the field or whatever party it is, and they've got the full set of equipment. Right. And you're playing at a disadvantage because you're ruling, managing, holding yourselves to a different standard.
Yes.
Do you just have to jump in and start playing dirtier?
And no question, there are a lot of very seasoned political strategists who will argue that you should. And as a politician who's been reasonably successful in that arena, I've probably been talked into that. Not on the lying thing. I've always been. It killed. Like I can't do it.
It's your red line.
It's my red line. It's my personal red line.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I haven't engaged in other sort of strategic things that aren't my first choice. And so we do have to do that,
it's
right?
Trade-offs.
It's the trade-offs. And so, but my red line is we need to have the facts. I mean, you may or may not, I don't know if you were living here at the time, but when we had the election in 2015.
I did.
And we introduced our fiscal, the costing of our platform. It's a big event. It was about, I don't know, 2.5 weeks before the election. And after we had the big event, we went, everyone went, oh, okay, great. And we went back to go, okay, well, that part of it was done. And then about 45 minutes afterwards, we get a phone call from one of our key policy people going, oh God, we screwed up. And so then we gamed out how to deal with the fact that we'd made a mistake in it. And there were some people that were arguing, oh, we can just slide right by it and we won't tell people that it happened and no one will notice. And I was like, no, we're not going to do that. We can't do that. I can't run a campaign that way. And I can't spend the next 2 weeks trying to hide something like that. So we did another press conference the next day. And a couple of people on the campaign went, well, there goes our campaign. It's over. Didn't work out that way. In fact, a lot of folks went, wow, that's refreshing. Yeah. So I do think that it can work. But the other thing I will say about sort of, the difference between the left and the right is another way that I think about it, which kind of gets at the same thing that you're talking about, less about tactics than it is about overall outcome, which is that on the left, center left, we believe that we can be greater than the sum of our parts. And we want to build something that makes things better. We want to build and we want to improve. Some on the right want to do that too, but on the far right,
they don't.
They just want to tear down.
Yeah.
And I had a bit of an epiphany at a certain point. This is their incredible advantage because it's not just that they want to tear down. It's in the course of, so first of all, that's really easy. Tearing down is so much easier than building up, right? Because when you build up, you're going to make mistakes. And so then you're making yourself vulnerable to the critique about the mistakes. It's still worth doing, but it's not easy. And so you're taking on a lot more. It's much more ambitious. And so as a result, you're making yourself more vulnerable to criticisms. Whereas tearing down, you just kick it, it's down and hey, look at me, I broke it. But the other part of it is that if in the course of breaking it, you then make a further error, you make a mistake as the person who is breaking, you embarrass yourself, you get caught in a lie, it hurts people, whatever. Even though it's embarrassing for that individual politician, it's still kind of a win because what they've just done is they've not only broken the thing, they've also undermined trust. In the politician
and in the systems and institutions
and the institutions.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's a double win for them. So we're not only trying to build the thing and making ourselves more vulnerable because we're building the thing and we sometimes make mistakes. We're also trying to protect the institution. Yeah. And it's really easy for them to do the other part of it. Yeah. So yeah, it's so great. It's easy, but it's incredibly unambitious and it's backward looking and it's insular. And it's the kind of thing that is exceptionally ambivalent to people's lives, neighbors' lives, all those things.
Yeah. Well, and also, assuming like federally, let's say Pierre Poilievre wins, right? He's going to have to, you can't just, at some point you have to stop burning everything down because there's only ashes left, right? You're going to have to try and build something. How are you going to build something that you've completely destroyed and undermined every sense of confidence in? Right.
Well, and the question is, does he want to build something? Well, that's the issue.
I personally, it frustrates me to no end that, I don't want just a politician to tell me what's wrong. Like, yeah, we can have that conversation, right? But tell me what you're going to do about it. Talking points are great. Like, that's fine. But like, I'm disappointed that people aren't asking for and demanding more of politicians because, when I talk to people who are like, yeah, I love Pierre Poilievre or whoever it is. Right. Yeah. And I'll be like, tell me, but how do you think things are going to get better?
Yeah. And in the case of someone like Poilievre, I mean, he's also the lucky beneficiary of timing.
Yes.
Right? I mean, he's coming at the end point of a pretty healthy governance term and by healthy, I mean, in terms of how long the Liberals have been around.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe not in Alberta, but certainly nationally, we historically keep governments around for so many cycles and then we change them. So he just happens to be here. So some of it is he's just getting credit for the fact that he is critiquing a government that people are starting to get tired of.
He's smart in the same way that Smith is, right? In my opinion, because they see an opportunity and they're using that to further their own means, right? They're taking advantage of, coming out of a pandemic, or we're still in a pandemic, like all of these different things, right? There's so much unrest. People are angry, they're upset, and they're preying on that.
Well, and that is also a very true thing. And you see that on the far right. And that is a really, really cynical way to engage in politics, to exploit people's fear and anxiety about their own situation by finding fake targets for their anger and their anxiety. And it's incredibly irresponsible and cynical. And it's an ugly way to practice politics.
Yeah, but and then it also comes back to what comes next. But I think it's also very frustrating to watch people who are considering voting for Trump again, thinking that he's the answer to their prayers. Well, their lives didn't improve at all during that period. So why do you think it would again? But it's just the hope and the expectation, right? It's like that they want to believe in something. Yeah. Right. If only they would believe in someone who's actually going to make their lives better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think those things are true. And so, we'll see what happens with Trump. I have a friend who's a very close friend who's a Trump voting Republican, and I've watched, and who's otherwise a very lovely, reasonable person. Yeah. I've watched him slowly start to question whether this is the right thing. Yeah. So we'll see. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm going to wrap up because we both have to move on with our day, but I wanted to end on something that was positive. And so Stephanie had the suggestion that I ask you about something, and it could be anything. It could be politics, or during your time in politics, or just anything you want, but a project or something that has brought you joy.
Well, let me think.
And it's maybe harder. These are harder questions, right?
Yeah. I mean, certainly, it sounds very wonky, but for sure, there are things that we did in government when we had the chance that I'm very, very proud of. Phasing out coal, we were the architects of the single biggest reduction in emissions anywhere ever in Canada. So that's a good thing. And there's not a lot of plans out there that are actually showing that. And so that's a win. And I'm very pleased. And, I'm from Edmonton, and, we had coal burning plants operating outside of Edmonton, and Edmonton for the longest time actually had lower air quality because of that. And so people are really actually legitimately more healthy now because of that. So that kind of makes me happy. The fact that our caucus is so diverse and has so many more women than men. I'm very proud of the way in which we've been able to create a place for all Albertans to see themselves in a position of maybe not, decision making agency. So that makes me very happy. I used to get downright teary over the fact that we were able to raise the minimum wage. That's kind of dissipated now that we are about to become tied for the lowest minimum wage in the country again. But I used to have people come up to me and tell me in lots of detail how their life absolutely changed when they were able to enjoy the benefit of the $15 an hour minimum wage, like 6-7 years ago. And that used to make me go, okay, that's cool. Yeah. So those things are great. And other than that, running, swimming in cold, fresh water. Running, music, hiking, these things bring me joy.
Yeah. Do you think that having like things outside of politics make you a better politician, like hobbies and activities?
Oh, I totally do. And hobbies and activities, the most important thing is to have a friend group that is, probably, sympathetic to what you're doing and all that kind of stuff, but is also separate. That's sort of there, like your family, your loved ones, and your friends who are there, so that you can mentally kind of disconnect periodically and just be a normal human. I think that's important. And then it allows you as well to sort of say, well, okay, this issue here that we've been losing our minds about, literally these people here over here have never heard about it.
Right.
So, but what they care about is this thing here. And so this is a good reality.
Like a check on your perspective.
Totally.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
So I think just that, kitchen cabinet, your own personal kitchen cabinet, that's how some people refer to it. But whatever, just having really good personal relationships that go past politics. Super important, I think. Yeah.
Are you excited about your time after? Like, are you excited about the transition?
I'm really looking forward to it right now.
Yeah.
I am. Yeah.
Well, and I'm excited for you. Like, I want you to just, have some rest
time, some rest. Yes, I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I, check in with me in a year. I may be like, I'm so bored. Can I come talk to you for like 9 hours on your podcast about all my issues? But
you can just come and sit in the store, and I'm sure people would love that.
Yeah. But no, I don't know. So maybe different than I think, but no, I think I'm quite excited about the things that I haven't been able to do for a few years, to be able to do more of them. And it sounds very trite because everyone always says it, but spend time with my family and get them used to me being around. I think there's a little bit of trepidation on their part, like, oh God, she's coming back a lot now. Are we ready for that? But anyway, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
It's good. Well, you're not done for another month and a half, so it feels weird to be like goodbyes. But I do want to share, like, a lot of people have a lot of respect for you and a lot of care for you, and even if they don't agree with you politically, they like you as a person.
Well, I like a lot of people who I don't agree with either. So,
I think that you're going to be greatly missed on, like, in not only in your role, but just on the political landscape.
Yeah. We'll see. I hope people are also inspired about what's coming. So
yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for your time today.
All right. Thank you. Yeah.